And what did your family think about this new Christine? Did they think it was a phase?
My mother in particular, I'm very close to my mother. Her and I share the same chemistry, a lot of the same views. She noticed a difference. She noticed that. I talked to her about some of the changes, but at the same time, there were other events going on in our household that were traumatic to my parents, involving my sister at that time. And they had their own issues to deal with at that moment. My mother ended up with an illness. But at the same time, they saw what was happening. And they certainly had an appreciation for the new Christine that wasn't so difficult to deal with anymore.
Now, you met your husband in Trinidad, right?
Yes, I did, interestingly enough.
Yeah, you've been married for what, 25 years?
25 years this August.
In fact, I think we got a picture, don't we? Yeah, there you go.
Very casual picture, my husband and I.
And what's his name?
Vince.
Vince. And he's a policeman.
Yes, he is.
And this
that's my oldest daughter to the right, her name is Natasha.
Right.
And to the left, that's Philip, our youngest. And that's Shelley, our middle daughter in school, fiddling with a camera. One of her friends took that picture.
Well, they're outstanding looking kids, my goodness.
Thank you.
They're young adults now, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
25 years married, I mean.
They are young adults.
Young adults, terrific.
Yes.
Now, you've met some pretty interesting people in your program, but two come to mind that you wanted to talk about. One was the Lieutenant Governor, David Onley. Tell us about him.
Yes. David Onley there he is in that picture, a remarkable, remarkable individual. Yeah. This fellow had polio in his toddler years. And what struck me about that interview is that he's a strong man of faith. He never defined his life by his polio. His parents never defined his life by his polio. Because, Jim, the critical importance here of what I would like to bring to the table is all of us have experienced various types of difficulties in our lives. Some of us have been victimized more than others, but we cannot define ourselves by our victimization. We cannot define ourselves by our weaknesses or our so-called earthly handicaps. When you look at David Onley, this fellow that had polio from very young, and he's still in a wheelchair today, he's an amazing man doing great things in this province, yet he never defined himself by his early polio.
And you can identify with this.
I can.
Because you could have been a disaster.
Complete disaster.
You could have been one of those statistics of a kid who just loses her way, and you could have ended up living on the street or something with all of the anger issues and the dislocation as an immigrant and so on. Like Onley, you found a moral center, an anchor in your faith.
Yes, I certainly did. And that's Jesus. Yeah. Because when you look at what the gospel teaches, and that's an issue even in today's society, people often that don't understand what the saving grace of Christ is, they see scriptures, they see the rules in scriptures as being somehow a form of imprisonment. It's not. It's very liberating and it's very freeing, understanding and knowing that as a loving parent, many people have had parents that were not so loving, but God is a loving parent, that those rules are in place for our good and for our liberation.
Another guest that you had, an outstanding guest, Pastor Kyles?
Yep, Reverend Billy Kyles.
Billy Kyles? Let's take a look at him now.
There he is, an amazing man.
I didn't know about this man until I was reading a bit about your life and your program. Tell us about this man.
Back in the civil rights movement, there were, just before Martin Luther King was assassinated, there were 3 ministers, including Martin Luther King and Reverend Billy Kyles and Reverend Abernathy, that were in a hotel room for an hour together before that fateful day when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Reverend Billy Kyles is the only one alive today, and he witnessed the assassination. What he told me on the interview was the horrors of the civil rights movement, the way those people were killed, massacred, hosed down with power hoses, the way they were treated, and particularly that Martin Luther King lived on a daily basis with the fear of assassination. His life was extraordinarily tormenting, yet at the same time, he was grounded in his faith and a sense of purpose. So another example of someone coming to the table, recognizing the greatness of God and keeping his focus on that as opposed to the torments and the tribulations and the victimizations of his own life.
It's not going too far to say that when you sit down with people like this, it can be a life-changing experience for us. At least in terms of how we see things. Our life is, I remember reading one time that we grow by the people we meet and the books we read, and people like you and me, if that's the case, are growing all the time because we're meeting new people and reading their books all the time. But when you think back over the course of 7 years of hosting On the Line, would it be fair to ask you who stands out, maybe the top 2, top 3 of all of the interviews you've done?
Wow, that's a very interesting question.
I think
the two I just showed there, those were the two.
There.
I would have to say those two did it.
No, Kyle's I never met, but Onley certainly. I had him on my Eye to Eye show a couple times. An outstanding man, and when he became Lieutenant Governor, I wasn't surprised. I mean, here is a true Canadian hero.
Okay, I'll mention one other person.
Yeah.
You asked me 2, but I'll give you 3. Willie Ames, actor Willie Ames, because he's well known to, I suppose, a lot of the audience watching and to the secular world at large. That man had a life-changing experience too, and he found the Lord later in life. But when I interviewed him, he talked about going to the Playboy mansions, talked about falling over the deep end, living a life that was questionable, but at the same time, he eventually came to know the Lord, and that completely transformed his life. It's the transforming of lives that I'm seeing, Jim, that speaks volumes.
And yet your program is not seen as a Christian show. You're dealing with secular issues, everyday issues that all Canadians are concerned
and multicultural
about.
Ones.
Multicultural
ones.
Right. And you also from time to time have people on from different religious backgrounds and traditions. So you have a very interesting place to fulfill there on CTS. In terms of your future, are you feeling fulfilled in what you're doing now?
I'm very fulfilled in what I'm doing, but in addition to that, I also write, and I find that very cathartic as well. I'm a columnist for Metro News,
right.
And from time to time, I also submit articles for Front Page magazine. I've been involved in a symposium involving homegrown terrorists there, which is of great interest to me, because there are many reasons why, not to justify them, why people choose that way of life.
So, as we have health and strength, 10 years from now, will you still be doing what you're doing now, or is there something unfulfilled yet in terms of your far horizon?
I think in life, Jim, there's something to be said with waiting on the Lord, but I have to definitely qualify that, because saying you're waiting on the Lord could also be an excuse for not having goals, and we have to know our own hearts in truly seeking what God would want for our lives. But I truly do enjoy writing as well. So that's an area that I'm developing more as I go along.
What kind of writing do you want to do?
What kind of a writing do I want to do? Jim, you're a probing man, and I don't blame you.
You want to write novels? You want to
it
you
can't
want
be
to do
novels.
academic works? You want to do
more academic,
more
academic, I think, yes, and more exploring, I think, our multicultural community. Avenues there.
Yeah.
Avenues there.
Do you feel fully a Canadian now?
I am fully a Canadian, and a very proud Canadian.
And do you go back to Trinidad once in a while?
The last time I've been back there was 1984.
Oh my!
And it's a beautiful country. I don't think a person should ever say bye-bye to their roots. There's a respect for that. Right. But being a Canadian is a privilege. And this is a country where the freedoms are enormous, and we certainly can't take that for granted.
No. Well, Christine, you're a terrific example of someone who has been there, done that, and so young. So much ahead of you.
Well, thanks for that compliment.
No, this is terrific talking to you, and I hope our viewers who enjoy your show now feel that they know you a little better. Thanks for coming our way.
Jim, it was a privilege.